So Mortal Kombat won round 1, and then it lost round 2, and then it won round 2.5, but we're not really counting that.
Yes, that was a mercy, but now it's time for round 3.
Fight! What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And I'm Jaime Sub-Zero.
That's right. We are back to finish out our Mortal Kombat coverage for this week. No, we are not going to be reviewing Mortal Kombat Conquest. I do not have time for a 22-episode sci-fi series, sci-fi level series.
Defenders of the Realm, which is an animated series I researched, and it never got a proper home release either. So we did what we could, guys.
Yeah. But today we're here to talk about the thing that we've been really excited about. I know it was one of the most anticipated for last year, wasn't it, Fuego, if I'm not mistaken? Or did we not? Was it not due to come in 2020? I get so lost in all of the shuffles.
Yeah, I can't say that I recall either. I know this has been in development for a couple years now. James Wan producing, and a first-time director in Simon. Oh boy, I can't recall his last name, but an Australian director who was personally handpicked by Wan to be at the helm. And so yeah, the buzz has been up and down, especially with how poorly received Annihilation was. So yeah, there was a lot of curiosity, but cautious optimism, I think, at least until that Red Band trailer went and set all those records. So
Simon McCoy was the name.
Yes. His last name was what I couldn't recall. So.
But yeah, so this is so whether it was supposed to come out last year or this year, it was an anticipated movie for the both of us. We're big Mortal Kombat fans. We were both fans of the original movie, not so much Annihilation, and then we all really liked Legacy as well. And what I was hoping was that it would be kind of a blend of Legacy and the original movie. And that's pretty much exactly what we got after a fashion. So starting with overall thoughts, I'm going to say that I really enjoyed the movie. I did have issues here and there, but they were relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. So I had a good time with this movie. I thought they were successful in what they were setting out to do.
I'm not quite with you, unfortunately, man. Whereas I felt like it started relatively strong, especially with those 7 minutes that they released that I did watch ahead of time. The 7-minute opening was on HBO Max. I just couldn't resist. But I felt like the strong start fizzled with a really weak script. And not only that, in the second and third act, this bordered on, in some ways, an R-rated version of Annihilation for me. Yeah.
So I did have some issues with structure, and I guess that does come down to script. So we'll get into that. But that's unfortunate. I mean,
yeah.
I kind of guess I guess I turned my brain off a little bit with it, and didn't mind. It wasn't. I mean, well, when we get into the acting, we'll talk about why it's not Annihilation. But but let's get into the story. So the way they frame this is interesting. I mean, they start off with the origin of basically the Scorpion and Sub-Zero rivalry, and then it flashes forward centuries till now, where we meet Cole, and he gets dragged into this weird mystical fighting world based on the mark that we saw in the trailer that he had, the dragon mark. Mm-hmm. And a couple of other people have it. And so basically there are people that are predestined to be fighters in the Mortal Kombat tournament. But there's some iffiness to that, because you may not be predestined so much as if you just killed someone that was predestined, then you get the mark. So the marks transfer, and that's kind of an odd thing. But obviously it's the age-old Mortal Kombat story where Outworld has won 9 of the 10 Mortal Kombats needed in order to invade Earth and take over. We don't see any of the other ones, but that is what we're leading up to. However, in this story, we never quite get there. This ended up being more like Mortal Kombat Legacy Season 1, where we don't actually get to the tournament. It doesn't actually happen. This is kind of a prequel to the tournament, ultimately. But you do get, one-on-one fights, you get fatalities, you get all that stuff thrown in. But if you don't buy into the main character, or who they play to be, or play to be the main character, then you're gonna probably struggle with a lot of this. The characters that have built-in cool stories are kind of just secondary characters, which I do think hurts the film. So story-wise, it's not what you think it's going to be entirely. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, you still get what a Mortal Kombat movie would be. It's just not technically the tournament. So, therein lie a couple of my structural and writing issues, which we'll dive further into, but I'll let Fuego get a pass at that first.
Yeah, so it was honestly Cole that his character, just I didn't like it, the family dynamic, all that different stuff. And I also didn't I was very upset that we don't really get a tournament, so to speak. And I know in some of these later games, like 10 and 11 especially, it's armies invading and breaking of rules and alternate timelines and time travel and various versions of people and all this different stuff. But a lot of my favorite characters I felt like were written kind of paper thin in a lot of ways, and some of their dialogue was kind of hammy. I mean, I think Kano had the most personality of anybody in this, but definitely a different take to a point without, spoiling where things eventually go. But man, some of the dialogue, especially like Cabal's dialogue, and Raiko's in there for whatever reason, Natara, and has like a couple things to say. And also, I didn't get very much Shang Tsung, and I wanted more. I just can't help but, after recently watching Legacy and the original film from '95, compare it to that. And I feel like a hardcore Mortal Kombat fan is going to find a lot to enjoy here, but they could also go the other way like me and be a little more critical of the fact that a casual person just going to watch this that doesn't understand a lot of the lore could be a little lost.
Yeah.
So.
No, I could see that. Yeah, because, it's just they're throwing characters and names at you, but no stories behind them or anything like that. And then some of them appear and are gone, pretty quickly afterwards. Mm-hmm. So they're not given time to be fleshed out where you care one way or another. I hope this isn't one of those reviews where the more I talk to you about it, I'm like, he's right. Because I enjoyed that I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. But I guess maybe that might be down to actually seeing, cool versions of things from the games. I mean, we saw there was one of the stages from Mortal Kombat 2, the bridge that Jax was fighting on. I was sure we were going to get a pit fatality as a result, but they ended up going with a different fatality. But I did like seeing actual fatalities. There was, I'm not going to spoil what, but Jax had a really cool fatality. Kung Lao had one of my favorite fatalities that I couldn't believe they actually put on screen. However, the circumstances surrounding that fatality are kind of lame. So it's a weird give and take that this movie has going for it, right? It gives you some cool stuff, some cool gore and action beats, but then it takes away with the fighting's not always super great.
And short fights too, which
yeah.
I mean, aside from some badass stuff, that the two best fights really bookend the movie. Mm-hmm. in all honesty, and they're with characters that are really the best part of the story. But I also just rewatched that Scorpion's Revenge, and I feel like in some ways they did some of that better. But then again, it's animated, it's not live action and stuff. In some ways, it's funny because the writers of this were critical of how cheesy they said the '95 version was, but I thought there was some hamminess in this one too. So, yeah. I mean, if you want the real, just grounded take, Legacy did it so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this one, we did get a lot of characters and some that we hadn't gotten before. I did like that they really strove to make certain ones movie or game accurate, to an extent. Again, one of the things that I noticed in the trailer that I ended up being correct about was the time the camouflage foot was setting down. I was like, ooh, I think that's probably Reptile. That ended up being Reptile, and I thought Reptile, you did see Reptile in the trailer anyway with Kano towards the end of the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything. But Reptile, I thought they did a cool job with Reptile. I was like, that's a badass fighter. You know, he's not the ninja necessarily that he was in the game, but he had all of the attributes that the ninja had, all the moves that the ninja had, and I dug the hell out of it, and it made sense for a character called Reptile. You know, so there were certain things that some people may be like, I didn't like that, but I was like, I kind of dug it. You know, we have all the other fighters. Lord knows we have enough ninjas in that style, just different colors. I didn't need a green one, you know. I like that. I'm trying to stick with the things that I like, but I guess without going, I mean, there's not much else to go into as far as the script goes without spoiling things. So
I mean, I will just say though that I feel like when you get to the middle portion, especially of the film, it kind of turns into like a training sequence sort of thing and trying to find powers and stuff. That's where the movie really, really dragged for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, because they had things going pretty solidly, and then all of a sudden it just stops to try and do a training montage that would have come before lots of the stuff that had already happened previous to it in any other movie. And so, it stops it, and it's not that interesting. It's not that well done. And it doesn't really... So apparently everyone has the ability, any of the chosen one has the ability to gain a power.
It's like
an power within.
I think they called it an arcana or something like that, which is like hidden mystery, whatever. And you know, that's one thing that I will give them credit for is that, you know, I was watching an Ed Boon interview from the Legacy supplemental material, and he's like, yeah, we've got characters like Johnny Cage launching these like green fireballs and stuff like that. So the fact that they at least explained how they could tap into these almost like superhuman abilities, you know, with the mysticism, I thought that was at least they gave some explanation, and I will credit the writers for that. So it just took a while to get there, and
and it wasn't like anything they could do to train to have the powers come out. It was always extreme situations where the powers would come out. So it's like, did they need to train at all, really, to get there? Another thing is, I don't think. Well, I guess we'll get to there when we get to the production design. Let's talk about the acting here. Yeah. I liked the acting. It's the script was rough at times, but I liked the acting. I mean, the actors were doing everything they could with the script to not sound silly. You know, sometimes they didn't have a choice because of the material, but for the most part, I thought the acting was solid. Some of Shang Tsung's, you know, lesser utilized lieutenants were silly, but other than that, I dug on the acting. I thought the acting felt fine and very character appropriate.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as I gripe on the Cole storyline being like injected into this, you know, without spoiling who he ends up being, because there's lots of speculation as to, you know, the connection of his character, so to speak. I didn't think he was that bad. His family, on the other hand, this Shang Tsung was drastically inferior acting-wise compared to the one that was in '95 and then returned in Legacy Part 2 and stuff. The henchmen were accordingly cheesy. You know, what else? You know, I really liked Liu Kang. I just wanted more for that character to do in a lot of ways, and Kung Lao, unfortunately, was a little stiff for me, as was Raiden. I felt Raiden was a little stiff, but, you know, Jax and Sonya were both good. Kano kind of steals the show, becoming the comedic relief that I guess Johnny Cage usually is in this sort of stuff. So he was funny. He had some of the best lines, some lines that treaded in where he's calling Raiden like Gandalf, where's my fortune cookie, stuff like that. I'm like, ooh, I don't know. I'm surprised you guys went with that sort of line.
Yeah.
But you know, he had some gems here and there, and so he was the most entertaining aspect for me, at least as far as, you know, getting some laughs and feeling like a defined character in a lot of ways, with an arc also.
Yeah, it was kind of the Kano show as far as that goes. Sonya was a little wooden at times as well. Again, Jax was doing the best he could with what he got, but yeah. I mean, again, the more we talk about it, it's like they just didn't have a lot to do, so it could feel stilted for some of the characters. Shang Tsung being the one currently in my mind. Yeah, he just didn't have the room to sort of chew the scenery the way that the original actor did in '95.
Yeah, he was a lot more stoic, and he only had a handful of lines in the entire movie. So as like the big bad, he didn't feel that formidable to
You know
me.
what I think it is also? I think it has to do with some of the filmmaking. You said this is a first-time director, am I wrong?
First time director. He is a commercial director, and this was his
Yeah.
feature. So it looked terrific.
Well,
and we'll get into cinematography
at times, but here's the
constantly.
thing. Some of the lack of punch from Shang Tsung, I feel like, was how he was shot. He
Yeah.
was never put in like the regal position behind his crew, right? He was always out in front of his crew, and his crew looked bigger and intimidating behind him than he looked out front. So they kind of didn't do that right, in my opinion. He should have been, back, sending people forward and sort of in the mysterious shadows, not always on the forefront, talking the entire time. And one of the characters even says he talks too much, and it's like, that's not Shang Tsung's thing. He's not a talker. He says things to be intimidating and impactful, but he's not just a talker for talking's sake. So some of the characterization was wrong, but again, that comes down to script more so than the actor. You can't really blame him. I did also notice one thing regarding the actor is after the trailer, they definitely re-ADR'd the "Get Over Here" line.
Oh, they did. They totally did, because everyone was making fun of it.
And that sucks too, because some of us were like, "No, I like that because it sounds like, someone." I can't. I'm a little confused. I would say it sounds like a Japanese man saying it, but they tried to make it sound like he was Chinese and Sub-Zero was Japanese, and they couldn't understand each other at first.
Supposed to be the other way around, yeah.
Yeah, so I was a little confused there, but nonetheless, they changed it so it sounds much less, much more American, let's say. So that was a bit of a bummer. But let's talk about the filmmaking a little bit more, since I touched on it with how they shot Sub-Zero. For the most part, it was shot cool. Like, it was a very pretty film. It wasn't confusing to watch the fights, which can happen with some filmmakers, especially first-time filmmakers, having to track tons of different fights. So nothing really got confusing, but I will say that nothing really blew me away as to how it was shot either. Like, there's a lot of times, so for instance, my basis for good fighting in movies for a while now has been The Raid. The Raid Redemption kind of set a new standard as to what really good fighting can and really should look like if you want it to be really cool and engaging and not just edit fests. And so I was hoping to get, when they showed the trailer, the stuff that they showed of human Scorpion, aka Hanzo, taking out those dudes around his house, I was like, oh, that's very The Raid looking, but I gotta say, almost none of the other fights felt like that.
Yeah.
So that's a weird thing. So at times the filmmaking is nice, when there's sweeping things to show, great, all that is fine, but I mean, it's a movie based around fights, and ultimately the fights weren't super interesting outside of that very first one that they showed in the trailer. Your thoughts?
And that's the one where we had those longer takes and stuff like that. But back to something I think I touched on earlier is the quick cuts on some of those third act fights, and also the fact that the 95 version I felt like had just a much more varied amount of locations for different fights and stuff. I mean, we kind of get to this Raiden, sort of like temple area midway through the film, and a lot takes place there. A lot of like we don't really go a lot of other places.
Not just there, but specifically in the training area there.
Yeah. This like
it felt like that's the only part of the whole temple.
Yeah. So we didn't have that sort of like location variety, and I wasn't too big on the look of Outworld, honestly. It was a combination of, they shot this whole thing in Australia, if I'm not mistaken, and so at times you had some really cool stuff, but the fact that we just kept seeing these similar looking like rocky locations mixed with some green screen, when Shang Tsung's like sitting on the throne and stuff like that. And then even some of those third act fights, like where they try to go to a few different places, it's like places we've been before. There's like a fight in like a double wide trailer, and there's more fights in the sandpit area. You mentioned the Jax fight, which I think was my favorite of those third act battles. But I I, I don't know. It just didn't have that, just myriad of different places, and it didn't feel as otherworldly as that first film, or honestly, even I mean, Legacy, I guarantee, had so much less money to work with, and yet we had so many different pretty and grisly looking locations. So I was unfortunately kind of critical of that, but there were still a few cool spots, and you know.
No,
So
I would agree with you. The locations that we did get were kind of blah for the most part. There were a couple that were okay, but nothing that could stand out, and that's sort of down to the production design, right? Like
yeah.
I think maybe what it might. I mean, how much budget could they possibly have had for this, right? I mean,
It was $50 million for this one.
50?
So,
Okay, well,
yeah.
shit. Then
I would, I
they
would
spent
imagine.
a lot on CG. But damn, though, I mean, if you've got that much, shit, throw production design 5 milli so they can put together some really cool stuff, because like that really makes the original Mortal Kombat stand out, and it does make, like, that's what was neat. Even though it was 1995, Scorpion's Outworld level felt different from, the Moaning Forest, or whatever it's called, the Haunted Forest, which felt different from Shang Tsung's Island, the beach, fight, which felt different from, the Goro platform where they were fighting and stuff. Like, every place felt different for the fights, and this was just kind of like, literally, when they had to break out and do their individual fights, they had to reuse locations that we had already seen in the movie, because they're like, well, shit, we already built the location, let's set one of the fights here, and we'll just be like, Raiden, take everyone to different places so they can't, gang up or whatever. And it's just like, would Sonya really choose her trailer park as her fighting location? Like, really? Like,
And also the spot where the Goro fight goes down, I was just like, really? Like,
yeah,
having this happen?
the
Okay.
front patio, really? Like, that's really where we're okay.
Yeah, I mean, the two highest quality fights are the two that bookend without spoiling what they are, and those are my favorite locations. Aside from, I mean, when we're first seeing Raiden's temple and some of the statues and everything, I thought that was cool, and some of the camera sweeps just showing the scale of it was nice, going through those caverns and whatnot. But it was the recycling of stuff after a while that just was a little lackluster for me.
No, I'm with you. Now, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the effects, obviously, because that's such a huge part of the movie. I think the effects were all done pretty well. There was only a couple times where the CG is just a little too overdone, but ultimately, I didn't really have a problem with it. I thought it all fit well enough. It's better than a lot of movies, but not quite as good as maybe your Marvel CGI. So ultimately, I didn't really have a problem with it, but I tend to be a little more forgiving when it comes to effects than some people are. What about you, Fuego?
No, I thought for the most part they were solid. I mean, there was a little bit with Reptile where it looked way too CG for me, but the design was at least significantly superior and more like video game accurate to what we got in later installments, where they turned him from a ninja into just a straight up lizard, so to speak. So that was cool. And the gore, I thought, like, Jax has a killer, moment, and you mentioned the Kung Lao bit. That's very brutal with the use of the hat and stuff. I thought the soul suck that we get looked pretty damn good. So in this case, I really don't have a lot of gripes. It's really going to be the selling point of this film for most fans of the series, is just getting to see that R-rated gore done in a live action situation. And I guess they almost got an NC-17 rating from what I was reading in a recent Yahoo article. They had to tone a couple bits down, like trim, the scene just a little bit, as opposed to lingering on, like a neck with like the remnants of a head and things like that. So
I was actually, we got a couple of later game fatalities too. But one that I was, well, I guess I can't say it, but there's a cat fight that ends in a particular way that uses the camera to reveal the fatality the way the game did, and I thought that was pretty cool.
yeah.
I don't know if you know what I'm referring to or not, Fuego, but I can tell you afterwards if not.
I'm trying to think, and I was just replaying 9
was,
and 10.
Again, the cat fight. How did the cat fight end?
The first one, right?
No, well, after one of the fighters unlocks her whatever you call it.
Oh, okay, I think I remember what you're referencing.
Okay, well,
yeah. In any event,
in any
I was
event,
satisfied with the fatalities. I mean, even though that's where I made the kind of R-rated, and like this is so much better than Annihilation, but the fact that it becomes kind of thin on character development and very fight centric, especially in the second and third act. I mean, we have the riveting arc of, you know, the Scorpion Sub-Zero conflict, which has become kind of like the mainstay of the series and the last few installments especially. But, you know, I was satisfied with, you know, at least the gore that is supposed to be like the big thing that fans were stoked for. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we should touch on the music briefly. I mean, it's typical cinematic music for the most part, but then towards the end, when you get to some of the later fights, they start to use a couple of music cues from the original 95 movie, which honestly, it's fun, but it did immediately bring me out of the movie because I was like, oh, that's right, the Mortal Kombat music. Okay, well, they're shoehorning it in when I don't feel like they had done it a bunch up until now. So it did bring me out of the movie immediately, but then I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I liked some of the synth stuff that they did here and there. I mean, I thought it's from the same guy who scored Blade Runner 2049 and various other stuff that I've enjoyed. So, you know, I thought that was good, but it just, we touched upon this in the 95, and I hate to keep comparing, but that soundtrack especially was so iconic with not just the mainstay theme, but, you know, lots of that other like heavier music, you know, the Fear Factory stuff and Geezer and, you know, Gravity Kills, KMFDM, so much awesome stuff. So this didn't have stuff that for me is going to be as like just timely and memorable, you know, with rewatches. And I think I'm going to go to the theater and watch this in Dolby and try to look at it with a less critical sort of slant and, you know, just see what those booming speakers, what they can potentially help me out with. But I mean, as a whole, to wrap it up, I didn't hate this movie. I liked it, but I really wanted to love it. And I guess I just couldn't, unfortunately, because I just wanted it to be, you know, a lot deeper than it actually was, you know, aside from just, you know, I mean, costumes were great. That's one thing that I will say. Character design and, you know, some of the outfits and whatnot I thought were really dope. But as a whole, I found maybe a little bit more to dislike than to just really rave about here. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, ultimately, I did enjoy it. I can't say that I loved it. I really wanted to love it as well. I wanted it to be, you know, just all the best things from the previous incarnations that didn't quite get everything right. I wanted this to be the thing that did. Unfortunately, it's like, it felt like every time I would be like, then like someone would come and hit me with a bamboo stick on my shins, right? And I'd be like, oh. I'd be like, oh.
It's an according analogy. Yeah, and it makes me wonder how audiences are really, and also just like the casual audience, like, because the Sub-Zero actor, he signed on for 4 films. Now, there's no guarantee we're even going to get more of them. It's going to really be dependent upon box office. But I'm assuming they want this to be a franchise. They want to make more of these, but it's just really going to depend on how it performs, not just here in the U.S., but internationally. It's been out for, I think, a week now internationally. It's only done like 10 million, so it's not doing gangbuster numbers, at least over there just yet. So,
but again, that's not taking into account the HBO Max of it all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
Well,
with the success of the Snyder Cut, and I'm guessing this is going to be based on, consider, right, I don't know if it still is the case, but it was the most watched R-rated trailer to ever come out, right? When that trailer came out, it like hit like 25 million views in like the first couple days or something like that. But
then it was beaten by the Suicide Squad trailer like a week or two.
Like a week or two later, exactly. But still, if it had that much fervency behind it, I imagine it's going to do very, very well on HBO Max. And so will that be enough for HBO to say, you know what? Let's do another one and see if it can gain more traction next time around. You know what I mean?
I would hope so. I mean, if this series could almost do the backwards Mortal Kombat to Mortal Kombat Annihilation effect, where the second one is like the Cameron effect or something, I mean, I would be all about that, because there is still so much awesome world building you could do, various other characters you could bring in that I feel like are a little more iconic than some of the weird ones they cherry picked for this, you know, because there's like 100 different Mortal Kombat characters over the course of these 11 games.
Oh my God, there's so many more they could touch on, and even a few from the base game that they didn't even get to yet.
Yeah, exactly. One in which they hint at that a lot of people were mad isn't in this. So
yeah, so let me liken it to another video game series. Maybe they can Resident Evil to Resident Evil Apocalypse it. You know what I mean? Because I personally think Apocalypse was a better and the best in the Resident Evil series. So at the very least, give me one step up good Mortal Kombat movie before it starts to, you know, taper down. But I think they could take the lessons and, you know, listen to some of the feedback that they'll get from this movie. Again, clearly there's a market for a good Mortal Kombat movie because people are champing at the bit for it. Or at least they were leading up to it. We'll see how the reaction will be over time, but, you know, if that sort of interest is there, it'd be silly to not try and take the lumps and fix those lumps in the next one, rather than doing it the way they did 95 to 97, where they were just like, oh, look at how well it did, let's cash grab this shit, you know what I mean?
And totally half-ass it, you know, if they put a little more, especially into the script, because, you know, from a production design standpoint and costuming, and I mean, there is a significant amount to like about it. It's just, for me, you know, once again, the stuff that I disliked was a little more glaring, unfortunately. So, do
we give the same director the sequel, or do we bring in?
I would say no. Yeah. I would say bring in somebody more experienced, and maybe even to switch out the writers, man.
But I wouldn't say bring in someone super commercial. Don't fucking bring in Paul W.S. Anderson, for God's sake.
No,
bring in the guy that made the Raid. You know, bring in someone that has established themselves. Bring in the guy that have Lee Wanell do it. You know, he kicked ass with Upgrade. You know what I mean? Yeah. He knows how to do action. Let him have a crack at it after his Invisible Man shit did so well too.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, actually. Like, since I would imagine Juan's Atomic Monster, I think is the name of his company. And he's been tight with Wanell for a long ass time. I don't know what his next project he has lined up is, but yeah, that would be a terrific choice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our non-spoiler review of Mortal Kombat. If you guys want us to do a more spoilerish version of it, maybe we can wait and do that on Sunday so Robert can take part or something like that. Maybe we have our review roundup this Sunday too, don't we?
Yeah, but I'm also coming early, remember, because of the Oscars. So. Oh,
that's right. Okay. Oh shit. Okay. And you and I have a couple of tier list rankings to do. Are you going to have Prom Night done? I just rented it from.
I rented the unrated. So
okay, yeah, me too.
That's the franchise we're going to be tackling, guys. So.
Yeah, so I went to and we need to do the series, the franchise tier list ranking too. So, all right, guys. Well, that's enough shop talk. Thank you so much for watching this review, especially if you've watched this far. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button and subscribe. If you haven't yet, ding that notification bell to make sure you don't miss other reviews going forward. If you are interested in any of our discussions on previous Mortal Kombat movies, all the reviews from this week are up. We actually also reacted to all of the Mortal Kombat 11 fatalities yesterday, and we did put up my reaction to the Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It trailer just yesterday. So if you missed any of that, check it all out. Thank you very much to our patrons for supporting the channel like you do. We greatly appreciate it, every single one of you. Thank you so much. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird.
And I've been Jaime Sub-Zero.
And remember, stay scared.